We've traded
Oh,
some
well,
messages.
guess what? I am going to talk now, David.
Oh,
So,
fantastic.
okay. So, first of all, I want to tell you how great it is to have you here today. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us to visit with David Patchen in San Francisco. David has a great following and a huge interest in his work. Um, David is originally from New Rochelle, New York, and he moved to California in his late teens. He had a very unconventional, I'd call it unconventional, beginning in the glass world. Um, he began his professional life in corporate marketing, which sounds like it's a long way from glass blowing, really. And it wasn't until he was 31 that David took a glassblowing class. And as I say, the rest is history. There was no turning around after that point. I would have to say it didn't take him long to catch up with other glass artists, because I would assume that most artists get started apprentice and started at a very young age. But as I say, David was 31 and he caught up very quickly. You've always had a lot of I'm talking to you, David, because you're there, but I've heard you've always had a lot of creative energy. You were a guitarist and musician, so you were used to working to the beat and always being under a lot of pressure. David uses complex Venetian techniques, and those of you who are familiar with his work know how complex his work is using cane and Marini. His forms are relatively simple, but the colors and the patterns are incredibly intense. David is primarily self-taught, which is pretty amazing. His studio in San Francisco is located in a landmark studio at Public Glass, and he'll probably tell us a little bit about that. And I know that David is still chairman emeritus of Public Glass in San Francisco, and you were a board member of Pilchuck, which is great to know. So before I introduce David, I want to let everyone know, if you have a question, please write it into the chat or the Q&A, and if it's appropriate to speak to David during his talk, we will. Otherwise, we'll save those questions until the end of David's presentation. So here is David in his home in Marin County in California, and it's really, really a pleasure, David. I'm so glad to see you.
Great. Thanks so much for hosting this, Sandra. Thanks to you and Daniel and your team for inviting me. I still can't get over how odd this is to do via Zoom, but hopefully we'll be back to normal times, and I can do demos and sweat in person and go through slides and all of that. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to take you through some slides that expand kind of on my background and what my interests are and all the weird stuff that makes me me, and kind of how I got to where I am. So let's see. So here we go. So like Sandra mentioned, my work is all about pattern. The forms are, it's important that they're beautiful and they're crisp and they're aesthetically pleasing, but really I'm obsessed with pattern and with color and the relationships between all of them. So everything I do it feels to me like play, actually, and hopefully it comes across that way. And so when I design work, I'm always thinking about kind of the visual relationships between all of the different details that are in a piece. And I try to make it interesting and harmonious and thoughtful. And I realize that every once in a while I can veer into, overly complex. And so I feel like there's a tension between aesthetically interesting and technically amazing and not overly complex. But I wanted to share just kind of close-ups because, I really think there was a gallerist who once said to me, wow, your pieces have lots of little stories in them. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm not classically trained as an artist. I'm not even unclassically trained. I'm not trained at all as an artist. So I don't really have as much the language to always explain what it is that I'm doing or expressing in kind of regular kind of art vernacular. But when she said that, I thought that was really an astute way of explaining it, because when I make these pieces, I am always thinking of like kind of little vignettes of relationships of color, and how I might divide different sections, and how colors will play with each other. Um, and like I said, because I have no classic art training, I've had to kind of learn color theory on my own, with a lot of trial and error. In the early days, mostly error, and I learned what I liked and what I didn't like, and I probably had way too many primary color pieces that were fighting their own internal battles before I decided what part of the color wheel I liked, and what colors I like to kind of combine or contrast. And I feel like I'm at a place where I'm a lot happier with how things turn out now than maybe 15 years ago. I love playing with detail as well, as you can see. And this piece actually is here because it looks like it's just white with windows, but if you get close up, it has about, I calculated around 560,000 little white threads. And that's made by pulling cane. And we'll talk about the techniques later, but pulling cane and then rebundling it and pulling it again and pulling it again and bundling it again. And this was as much a technical experiment as an aesthetic experiment. But I've been doing this about, 21 years now. And there are definitely some themes, kind of the ones that I've talked about, but playing with the detail and the transparency. I recently started playing with some glow in the dark glass, which is what this piece is made from. So kind of the outline of all these little pieces is this phosphorescent, very special phosphorescent glass that a friend of mine makes in Virginia. So a little bit of background. Like Sandra said, I grew up in New York. I was there until 16, when we made a pit stop in Arizona, actually, because of my dad's business. And I graduated college there, moved on to LA. I worked in the advertising industry for about 5 years, and then eventually made myself my way up to the Bay Area because I discovered that I love technology. And so in '96, I moved to Palo Alto, and I was working at a startup there called Web TV. You may have heard about it. It was purchased by Microsoft. And anyway, so I spent a long time in technology. But in 2001, I took a glassblowing class. And I don't really have any good reason as to why I took that glassblowing class, other than, hey, some people want to, learn to be beekeepers, or, take a pottery class, or, get scuba certified. And I always thought, wow, it'd be really, really interesting to see how molten glass works. And so I attended a demo at Public Glass, which is a nonprofit glass center in San Francisco. And I saw a team of two people, woman who instructs at CCA, actually, and they blew these beautiful red cylinders. And I signed up for a beginning glassblowing class on the spot. And so that was January of 2001. And when I took the class, the instructor said, "You've done this before, haven't you?" And I said, No, I don't know. I'm just reasonably coordinated. And anyway, I loved it so much. And, obviously it ignited like a serious passion. And so I just kind of started doing it as a hobby. And after, I don't know, probably a year and a half, I was making stuff that was nice enough to sell. And so I started selling them in kind of craft galleries after my parents' house filled up and my brother's house filled up. And, what are you gonna do with all this stuff? And so my goal initially was really just to support my hobby, because glassblowing is really expensive. So I just wanted to do it for free. Like, if I could blow glass for free, that would be amazing. And I found that, unlike some other artists who have trouble like parting with their work, it just blew my mind anytime anyone wanted one of my pieces in their home. I thought that was so flattering. And to this day, I'm still incredibly honored and flattered when someone like wants one of my works. Anyway, so it became kind of like a hobby that turned into like a little side business. And so I took some time off of work and during the dot-com bust. And I thought I was just gonna take the summer off. And so I was calling it the summer of Dave, where I was gonna go scuba diving and I was gonna go travel and just have a really good time, go mountain biking and go to Europe with some friends and all of that. And then I would get back to, working in technology. And so at the end of the summer of Dave, the dot-com bust was still in full effect in Silicon Valley. And there were really no jobs to be had at all. So the summer of Dave turned into the year of Dave. And then I had to think a little more long-term. And I said, I'm gonna get really good at this glass blowing thing. So I really focused and I started blowing glass more often. And then when it came time to go back to work, I decided, I obviously I need to go to work just to support myself, but I just don't want to do that full time anymore because I was having so much fun in the studio and it was kind of growing as a side hustle. So I decided I was going to be a consultant. And so I consulted, and then over about 10 years, I ramped my consulting from 30 hours a week down to about 10 hours a week. And I ramped kind of my glass blowing up. And so when my son was born about 9 years ago, I went full time just blowing glass. And it was a very, very weird feeling to see the last consulting gig I had was with Nest, the people who make the thermostats.
Yes.
And they'd been acquired by Google. And so I got a call from Google and they said, would you like to do this consulting? Someone's going on maternity leave. Would you like to take over? I did product management and product marketing and marketing communications, all that kind of stuff. And as much as I do enjoy it, and I think the challenge is really fun, and I like working with smart people and in collaborative environments. I love glass. It's so much fun. And anytime I was ever, in a meeting at work, all I could think about was like, I want to get to the studio to design the next piece or see what comes out of the annealer, et cetera. So that's when I said, enough of this. I'm just going to do what I love. And it's worked out pretty nicely.
That was a risk at the time, though, wasn't it?
It was, but it was because I did it over 9 years, where I ramped the consulting down and I ramped the glass up. It kind of worked out about even. Financially, it was fine. And now I can be obsessed over something that I absolutely love, as opposed to, I don't know, being in meetings talking about product plans and budgets and things, which, sometimes is fun, but I'd rather blow glass. So anyway, this is me and my family. I have a 9-year-old boy and a little girl who's turning 8 on Monday. So this is the birthday weekend celebration this weekend. So anyway, and like Sandra said, we lived in San Francisco I think I lived there about 17 years. And just a year ago, during the pandemic, we bought a house up in Marin and moved over to the Golden Gate Bridge, which increases my commute, but I get to drive over the Golden Gate Bridge 4 days a week when I go to the studio, which is pretty awesome. I love to mountain bike, and Marin is fantastic for biking. This is from the top of Mount Tam. You can see the city in the distance. Mount Tam is about 3 miles from my house, and it's the mountain that kind of overlooks all of Marin.
Beautiful.
Here's a glass blowing tool bench. And I put this up here because as much as I love making stuff out of glass, I also love making things out of other materials. And because glass blowing is, you're not going to like go buy the tools at Home Depot. It's pretty specialized. There aren't a lot of tool makers in the world. And then when you start doing specialized work, my work is very specialized in Marini. You need certain tools that you can't just buy. So I made these large sword-looking things here, and I made that large color paddle out of Damascus steel and some really highly figured, I think it's koa. But I've been a kind of a crafts person, someone who works with their hands from a pretty early age. I've always been interested in materials and what I can do with them. One of the fun things about having a house is that I set up a small wood shop, and I'm able to make some small stuff at home. Like Sandra said, I used to play guitar. I could not find, because we still have boxes from the move, I could not find an old picture that I was looking for of playing guitar in college. This is my son playing one of my guitars. But I was, like I said, I get pretty passionate and, you know, maybe a little obsessive in my interest in things. And so from the age of about 14 to, you know, maybe my mid 20s, I was in bands and, you know, I would play guitar for practice for like 6 hours a day after school and was really, really into it. And at one point I thought of a career in music and I just decided that wouldn't really be a great kind of long-term direction. But when people ask me like, oh, so what is your artistic training? I don't have any, but, you know, music was always my kind of creative outlet for many, many years. And I'm still a really passionate music fan. And now that my son has picked up guitar, occasionally we play guitar a little bit together, which is super good fun. I love travel, and I used to do a ton of it. You know, whether it was for work in the corporate days or for fun when I was, you know, doing a lot of scuba diving. I've kind of been diving around the world, and we'll kind of get to some of that. But I love Japan. I'm a huge Japanophile. I love their food to no end. Like if I had to eat one food for the rest of my life, it would be Japanese food. And to the right, the image on the right was actually a month from a residency that I had in Seto City, Japan. I spent a month there. They invited me over and they gave me an apartment and a bicycle, and they showed me where the studio was and provided me with assistance. And I just got to blow glass for a month. And because I was in this kind of quirky suburb that was a center for ceramics and glass for Japan, there were a lot of glass people there. There were a lot of ceramic people there. There was this glass and ceramics center that was there from some kind of a World's Fair event. But now they let graduating students from the local art school use it. So it was fantastic. I was like inserted into this kind of this culture of making with lots of passionate glass people. And anyone who's been to Japan knows how amazingly hospitable they are to foreigners. And there was a lot of media because we were in the suburbs, and, you know, here's this guy from California who's come to stretch glass down the studio and, you know, make all sorts of intricate things. And so that was pretty fun. And I really miss traveling for glass and, you know, just kind of traveling for fun. You know, having kids definitely affected that, but also obviously, you know, COVID's put the kibosh on that in a big way. I love craft beer, and I love making amazing cups, mostly just for fun. I don't really sell cups, but, you know, these are really fun to make. Ooh, look at that!
Very nice.
Interesting things, but I'm lucky to have lots of craft beer around here, and wine country 45 minutes away. I mentioned I'm an avid scuba diver. I should say I'm on hiatus right now. You know, because of COVID and you know, raising 2 young kids, but hopefully I get back to it soon. But I've been diving all over the world. I think this is from Komodo Island, which is off, it's an island in Indonesia where the Komodo dragons are, and we got to visit them. And this cuttlefish was friendly enough to let me blow bubbles next to it. Diving to me is really all about the wildlife. I'm not like an adventure diver. I'm not doing cave diving or, you know, stuff that's particularly dangerous. I just love nature, and I love critters, and I love the colors. And, you know, it often comes up when people ask me about my inspiration. And I think I have a slide on that soon. Well, maybe not this soon, but I think there's definitely some inspiration that comes out of diving. But like Sandra said, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to say, I'm not surprised. A couple of other artists have told me the same thing. They dive, and what an influence it is on their work. I mean, it's a whole other world, I guess, and colors and patterns.
Yeah, it's definitely the closest you can get to visiting another world. You know, it's the closest we'll get to visiting another planet, and it's right here on this one. So yeah, you don't want to get me started on how I think that everyone should try scuba diving, despite however scared they are of it, because it's really magical. Anyway, so this is, you know, as Sandra said, and I mentioned earlier, This is the old Microsoft badge. Spent 8 years there, and also spent some time at Yahoo and some consulting with eBay and a whole bunch of different startups. And I was in the at an Arbach US West Communications for a few years doing new product development. And I am glad to have this employee badge in the archives. So like I said, I stole my own thunder about inspiration. Here's some photos from diving. And I probably dove my first 50 dives without a camera. And then a dive buddy that I had consistently throughout all of my dives is a professional underwater photographer. And so he got me into shooting underwater. And so here are just a few images that I kind of pulled out as, like, I don't know, just sticking with me in either pattern or color relationships, contrast. These critters are some of my favorites. These are, I think 3 of them are nudibranchs, and one of them is a sea slug. The upper right, I think, is a sea slug, and the rest are nudibranchs. Maybe there's some divers on who can correct me, but they are not much bigger than your thumb, and sometimes quite a bit smaller. And the colors on them are spectacular. And there was a point, probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, where I had my handle on the technical aspects of controlling the glass in a way that I wanted, but I was kind of really still getting my arms around color. And I got myself a book on color theory, but I also decided I was going to look a little bit more in the marine environment. So I bought like an $80 book just of nudibranch, of all of these critters. They're all over the world, and they're still discovering species, but I think these things are just magic, just really amazing.
It's hard to believe that they're only the size of a thumb, though.
Yeah, isn't it incredible?
It is.
It's amazing.
All the detail.
Yeah, they're just incredible. But I find inspiration even in this is a bunch of asparagus, and I remember picking it up, and I texted my assistant. I was like, "Look at this! This is a new Marini design," and I found it at Whole Foods. So I don't ever, like, for example, I don't ever look at a nudibranch and say, I'm going to use those colors today. It doesn't really work that way for me. I found that after I bought that big nudibranch book, I flipped through it and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But, I don't ever take something and bring it into the studio and say, I'm going to make Marini in these colors. I just kind of note, like, wow, that gold and that kind of ruby purple looks really cool together. And I don't know, it just comes out. So another thing I love about scuba, and in this picture, is this ability to, like, suspend things in clear. And glass does that in such a magical way when you leave it a little on the thick side. And anyone who's seen my work in person knows that it is intentionally on the thick side. And it's on the thicker side for a couple of reasons, but I think the most important is that it provides a 3-dimensional effect, just like you can see with the fins on these fish. And if you blow it out thinner, it flattens the image. And so I love being able to see the lines of the threads in the Marini, and you can kind of see how they moved with the heat. And it provides a degree of motion that I find really compelling aesthetically. This is another example. This is some kind of a worm. And I think it's only about the size of a $50. And I remember sitting there and stopping and just watching it move in the current, all these little threads. Yeah, it was really amazing. So those are the things that feel kind of, I don't know, just like magic inspiration to me, but they don't direct my work on a day-to-day basis. I just want to give a quick overview of my work. As Sandra mentioned, there are a series of forms that I create in. I think of them really as 3-dimensional canvases. They're intentionally simple just to really highlight the patterns and the colors. I feel like if I made really complicated forms, as much as they would be fun to make from a glass blowing standpoint, I feel like they would fight with the pattern. So I just want I just want it to be the pattern. So in some ways I feel really fortunate, you know, a canvas is square or rectangular, and I get to play with canvases that are all sorts of different shapes. So this is what's called folio. It means leaf in Italian, and it evolved over the years, but this is kind of where it's at these days. I think this piece is at the Ainsley Gallery.
We have that piece. It's a beautiful piece.
And this is called parabola, and parabola is it's a type of curve, and I called it this because I started playing with spheres, and I would stretch them out, and I would squat them down, and I would flatten them, and so this was just one of the shapes that kind of came out of it. Some people might call it a tall bottle, but I just call that series parabola. This is ellipse, and this did start out as flattening spheres. I started making spheres, and I decided that a sphere didn't let you see as much of all of the patterns, and you had to kind of move around a sphere. So I flattened it, and I liked it better. So so that's ellipse, and I think that's just behind Sandra. Yeah. Oh, we're gonna, in the how it's made, we're gonna get to see this piece again. We'll see kind of how it was put together. This is called Bloom. This was a real departure for me from kind of a sculptural vessel or a vessel form. And it was really interesting. I evolved this over some really awkward forms, but the origin of this was a geode. And I had a geode as a kid, and I love this concept that when you have a geode, until you crack it open, it's just a rock, and you have no idea whether it's just a solid rock. And I don't even know how people figure out that, hey, we need to cut this thing open because there might be something, crystals inside. But I love this idea of kind of this beauty that's hidden in objects, and also the contrast between like a drab exterior and the crystals that are inside a geode. So I experimented with more like geode looking things. And I also love orchids, and I like other curious plants. I keep some pitcher plants and a bunch of orchids. And so I kind of combined this idea of something unexpected and beautiful that's exposed, and the kind of the idea of a bloom. And I think there's also some underwater influence, because this definitely has a little bit of underwater creature to it. And they started out early on with I wanted to contrast the inside with the outside. So the outside was matte black, and the inside was colorful. And then I started doing them in different color combinations, but always kind of contrasting to a degree. But these are super fun to make, and they're always, I'm sorry?
They're very dramatic, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. It's also, they're very mysterious to make kind of as a glass blower, because when you're in the process of making them, until the very last part of the piece, you don't really know how well the pattern, how the pattern is distributed, how the pattern blew out, how the pattern is applied to the inside of the piece until the very, very end. And so it's kind of a fun surprise when I cut them open and peel them back. This is called Piscine, and this was a little bit more of a direct inspiration. It's a fish shape, it's flattened. And it actually came from a few things. I had a gallery owner who said, you know, it would be really great to have something that is low and is not very tippy, because this was a gallery in San Francisco. And she said something that is people are going to be comfortable with in earthquake country. And I thought about that, and I said, okay, something low, huh? And so I started making these, and at first I made them in trios, because I envisioned them kind of as a school of three. And so I've sold a number of them as trios, but some people just like them like on their own, and they're beautiful. They're about 18 inches long, and there's a lot of thick glass around them. So, you know, close up, they're really three-dimensional. Like I mentioned before, here's a sphere. This one kind of looks very honeycomb to me. And I was playing kind of on one side of the color wheel. I said, okay, I'm going to do something in like reds and oranges and golds, yellows, and I wanted to kind of relate them. And I ended up going with kind of a brick red and contrasting it with yellow. And I've made the spheres are actually a little tricky to make, because it doesn't seem like it's all that big. but a 14-inch sphere is really quite large. It's more than twice as large as a basketball. And so you kind of got to make them really fast when it comes to blowing. And they got to be perfectly round or else they look weird. So it's kind of a fun technical challenge, especially with all the colors, because anyone who's ever tried to blow glass knows that colors behave differently when they're hot. And that's kind of the technical challenge of making things that are very colorful. This is dewdrops, another kind of radical departure from my work. It was an outgrowth of a corporate commission that I had where I needed to make some corporate awards. And I had so I had to make these kind of long crescent shapes, and I had some left over. And I thought, oh, what do I want to do with these? I don't want to throw them out. I'm kind of passionate about not wasting things. Like if there's something I can do to repurpose it. And so I started playing with them, and I got my hot glue gun and I started gluing things together and kind of came up with this. And it's been really fun. I've done probably, I don't know, 12 or 15 of them. And one of the most fun things in my career was I installed 8 of these on a brand new cruise ship a few years ago. And we had to fly out to Germany, my assistant and I, and we got on this cruise ship that was still, brand new. There were workmen all over it, but it was at the very last stages of outfitting. They were finally doing, finishing up carpets and artwork and things like that. And just after we got on the cruise ship, they said that they needed to do a sea trial. I thought we were going to be in the port the whole time. So we went and cruised around the coast of Sweden while my assistant and I installed 8 of these in a beautiful, like, fine dining restaurant. And that was really fun.
This is a great direction.
Yeah, it was really fun. And this is Resistenza. It's an early form for me. It's a kind of a flattened bottle shape, a familiar glass blowing form. And it's made a little more difficult by using all of those colors. But difficult is fun. I really enjoy the challenge.
Gorgeous combination of color.
Thank you. Then I've done a bunch of collaborative work, and I love collaborating with other artists because I find glass blowing, my own work is really, I'm pretty much working solo when it comes to design and aesthetics. I mean, obviously I have help in the shop. I usually work with one assistant in the hot shop, but for the most part, I'm by myself designing work. And I'm a pretty social, collaborative person. And that's one of the things I miss from the corporate world, is that kind of, collaborative work. So when I get to work with another artist, it's always really interesting to me. And I'll learn things, through the way they work, but I'll also learn things about myself. And I like that it pushes me out of my comfort zone, to varying degrees, depending upon what it is we're doing. So this piece is a collaboration with an artist named James Devereaux, who lives not so far from Bath in the UK. And through the magic of the internet and social media, which, this never would have happened 12 years ago or something. But the glass world is really well connected on social media. And so James and I became friendly just through Facebook and Instagram. And he said we admired each other's work. And he said he was coming to Pilchuck to do some teaching. And, was I interested in him swinging by San Francisco and doing a collaboration? This is his form, by the way. And so I said, yeah, sure, that would be super fun. And he and I got together. This is pre-pandemic, probably only by about 9 months or so. And we got together in San Francisco, and I set him up to do a demo at Public Glass, because we had these fundraisers, the pre-pandemic, where we'd have a glass blower doing demos and a jazz band, and really good times. And I can't wait to get back to that stuff. But James and I demoed making the next slide, which is this guy. So we did one of these as a demo, and we both had a great time working together, and we saw eye to eye and brought different strengths. And so now we've probably done 15 or so of these, and they're really amazing. James's expertise is he's an amazing glass blower, but one of the things that he's developed is this chipped kind of edge, and it's almost like flint knapping. and except it's done when the glass is hot and, you know, not so hot that it dents, but not so cold that it shatters the whole thing. So James has figured out just the perfect temperature to do this, to get this beautiful irregular scalloped edge. And then it's flame polished, so it's not sharp. But it's amazing. You get to look into the piece and you can kind of see behind the pattern. And this form is his as well. This is called a clovis, and this one's called a quillin, which references the hilt of a sword. But both of these have that chipped edge. And what's been interesting about collaborating with him during the pandemic is that, you know, the Marini patterns are all mine, and I create them in San Francisco, and then I make them into kind of a cup shape, like a very, very thick cup, which is called a blank. And I'll accumulate a bunch of these blanks, and then I'll put them in a box, and I'll post them over to James, and James gets them in a small town in England, and he heats them up to about 1,000 degrees, and he sticks them on a blowpipe, and he goes about, you know, finishing the sculpture with the patterns that I send him. And then he has to, you know, go about the cold working and the stand making and things like that, and the photography. But it's amazing that it's worked this well. And our communication really has been maybe 2 phone calls and 10,000 text messages and emails. So yeah, it's been fantastic, and I have a great time working with him. We also met up not only in San Francisco, but a bit in Murano at the GAS conference, which was before COVID. I think it was 2018.
That's right.
And so yeah, so that's where that's going, and we're looking forward to showing some of these works.
Oh, here's James. What would the scale of that piece be? How tall is that piece?
I think these are about 3 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them I think get up to 42 inches or so. Some of them are huge.
Mm-hmm.
I know this one, I think, was about 32 inches wide, and they're solid glass, so they're really sizable and 3-dimensional. They're really beautiful.
Beautiful work. Yep. Okay.
So I don't know if James has anything to add on those guys.
Annie, I think
Or we
if he
can
wants
catch up
to
to.
talk, maybe Daniel can open it up so he could speak now. Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't have anything to say right now. But there he is.
Hey.
Hey, this is only our 3rd phone call.
I know, this is amazing. Do we talk business?
Nice to meet you, James.
Nice to meet you too. It's yeah, it's a little bit later in the evening here, but yeah, it's lovely to hear. I mean, I've actually never really heard through all of David's history in his past, other than over than the odd craft beer here and there. So it's yeah, it's really interesting to hear everything, and everything brought together in one time. It's thoroughly interesting. But yeah, as David said, it's been so amazing to work together, and certainly I think doing it over the pandemic as well, it's actually, if anything, it's enhanced this ability to work together in complete remote isolation. I think if it would be lovely to have David over or come over to San Francisco again, but the fact that I have no idea what patterns are going to turn up, and then I respond to those with which shapes we're going to use and how I'm going to flatten them, and whether we're going to make them shallow or the tall shapes, and David has absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with them before when he's making them. I think it's an amazing dynamic that if we were in the same room just wouldn't happen, because you'd inevitably end up by talking these things over.
Probably wouldn't have happened before COVID either. You know, our whole world of communicating has changed. We wouldn't be here talking and communicating and meeting each other. It's great.
Absolutely.
That's the good that comes out of the bad. I shouldn't say it's good, but it is something that's led the way for us to cope with what's happened around the world.
Yeah, it is. Human nature will find positives in anything that's thrown at us, hopefully.
Well, congratulations. It's beautiful work that you're making with David, and I'm sure your work on your own as well must be beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for visiting.
Nice to see you, buddy. So I talked a little bit about early inspiration, but from an artistic standpoint, a little early inspiration from kind of a more of a technical glassblowing standpoint is this guy. And like Sandra said, I'm primarily self-taught. I took a beginning glassblowing class in 2001, which was something like 8 weeks. And then after that, I found that a friend of a friend had been blowing glass for about a year. And so he and I started working together. And of course, I was drawn to detail. And so I immediately wanted to pick up cane. And so, and play around with Marini. And so I did that for probably 3 years or so. And then I went to a gas conference and I ran into a guy who was the North American distributor of Afro Chilotto's work. And this is Afro Chilotto blowing glass here. And Afro was Lino's assistant, I think from the age of about 14 to around 26 or so. So, he had probably the best teacher you could imagine. And this guy named Ken, who was Afro's distributor, said, "Hey, I'm going to be going over to Murano and I'm going to be, purchasing a bunch of Afro's work. And, would you like to go? I'm sure you can watch him work." And I said, "Oh my God, to go to Murano and, watch a master work, that would be amazing." So I went, I think it was around 2004 or so. And Afro was kind enough to let me watch. And I watched he and his team make all of this complex Italian work with cane and Marini. And they didn't really speak English much at all. But they were kind enough to let me watch and ask some questions, usually sketched out and, kind of with whatever broken combination of Spanish and Italian I had to make ourselves understand each other. I learned a lot, and I learned mainly just by watching. So I was only there a week, and I watched those guys do all the things I'd been struggling with, and they did them like effortlessly while cursing at each other and drinking beer at 9 in the morning. And it really, because I'm a visual learner, it really enhanced my technique a great deal and developed my skill. So I came back and trial and errored my way through everything that I'd learned. Another influence or inspiration, I should really say, is Dante Marioni. And sorry, I didn't have a better picture of his work, but Dante was one of the few guys that I saw in America who was making really precise, crisp, large scale work in Marini. And he's a modern master. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times, and a nice guy as well, and just makes spectacular work that was really definitely an inspiration to me in the early days. Another guy is, a lot of people will recognize Marvin Lepofsky. And, he's not an inspiration like the first two guys, because he wasn't a technical inspiration, but I gaffed some work for him. I don't know how many years ago. This is a really long time ago, probably 12 years ago. And this is around the time where I felt like technically I had gotten to a point where I could make what I had envisioned, but I was still struggling. This is the time where I was struggling with colors. And I was trying to figure out, okay, so I can make this stuff, but man, it's kind of ugly. And it uses too many bright contrasting primary colors. And I wasn't really happy with it. And, I was giving myself the color theory self-class. And that's around the same time that I did some work for him. And he brought me a whole bunch of color rod, which is, the concentrated rods of color, how we make Marini. And he brought all of these colors that I never thought would go together. And he was writing down, okay, so put this over this and this over this. And so I made this Marini for him, and I picked it up and we blew it into his works. And it really challenged just kind of my idea as to what works, what doesn't work, and why it might work. And it made me think a lot harder about color. And so I kind of, this work I did with him came at kind of the crux of when I was challenged with that. And so I kind of, I respect him for helping me think harder about that. So everyone wants to know how it's made. there's a lot on the web now about this, but I'll take you through my process. I thought that since this is more in kind of the vein of a studio tour, I would not just play like, some video from Corning of a demo that I did. I thought I would just grab stuff off my Instagram, which, we'll see a little bit more of what's going on in the studio. And you wouldn't have to like suffer through watching lots and lots of reheats, which are quite honestly pretty boring. So I'll just kind of hit on the highlights here. So the first thing I start with is pulling cane. I think this is a video. So cane are long colored rods of glass. Well, they don't even have to be colored. They're just long rods of glass. And in order to make the threads, I first have to pull cane. So we'll stretch the glass. Well, first we'll layer colors over each other, and then I'll get it really hot, and we connect it to another stick, and then I'll hand this stick off to my assistant, which I'm about to do, which is why the video ends, because he needs to grab the punty. And then we'll stretch this. I'll walk down the hallway, and we'll stretch this into about 50 feet of glass. And this is what they look like. So after it's stretched, I'll then chop it up usually into about 6-inch lengths. And from here, now I can start to use it. I can apply it. And I can apply it by laying it out on a ceramic plate and heating it back up. And then I can apply it to other hot pieces of glass like this. So this is making marine. So what's going on is on the pipe are probably layers of different colors, and those are applied hot. They can be applied so many different ways. Sometimes you can layer one color over another color called an overlay, or maybe I'll start with a bundle of cane. I think I may have a photo of this where I'll take a bunch of cane and I'll wrap it up in a wire, and we'll heat that up and fuse it all together and get all the air channels out of it. Now it's just all of these pieces of cane, and then maybe I'll roll up some other cane. So this is what's happening here is I'm rolling up cane that is probably at around 1300 degrees. And at that temperature, the glass is pliable. So, and it also will stick to itself. So my assistant has squeezed the rods of cane together, and because they're warm, they stick. And then I roll my bubble across the top of it. And when glass is about 1300 degrees or hotter, it's very sticky. So it sticks to it, and I close this up, and then we can pull it. After I get the heat all even, we hang it up on a pulley system, and we stretch it, and it stretches out into a long rod, which then gets cooled overnight, and then this rod gets cut up on a wet saw, kind of the same saw that you would cut tile on, ceramic tile, and it makes all these little slices. So my work is made up of hundreds of these little slices, and you can see this is pretty simple Marini, but you can see there are the little threads of the cane that I had pulled and rolled up. And then when you put them all next to each other, so this is a big ceramic plate, and I spent hours arranging the Marini, these little cross sections of glass, on plates like this. And a lot of people think that I must blow glass every day, but I don't have time to do that because there's so much design required for my work. I spend more time designing the work than I do actually blowing it. So I blow usually about 10 to 11 hours a week. And the rest of the time I'm doing other things, but more than half the time is arranging. So once I filled this plate with Marini, it became this piece.
So what part is the most rewarding to you? What part of the process?
It's really hard. I love all of it. I really do. I think I love making it. And yeah, there's no one part actually, because I love making the Marini, and then after it's cut, I have an assistant cut it up, and she provides me with bowls of, each Marini pole probably has about 350 little slices. And when I take those slices and I start to arrange them, that's a really fun time for me. I put on some music, and I'll figure out what it's going to be. And at that point, I have a vision in my head as to you know, what the final piece, what I want it to look like, and I can arrange it on the plate commensurate with that final design. And so that's a really kind of fun, creative time. And then when I go in the hot shop to make these, that's more of an execution. You know, that's just making it, you know, really precise, really crisp, doing my best to execute on all this time and energy I've put into, you know, designing it. And that's really, really good time. And then opening the annealer after it's cooled for around 28 hours and seeing how it turned out, that's really amazing too. You know, just to see like this thing that I kind of gave birth to. So I don't know, all of it's really fun. I don't like cold working them very much. It's grinding the bottom. That's the only thing. So this is the piece that Daniel has up. This is what it looked like right before we heated it up. And there's a video here. So this is all from my Instagram. I do a lot of Instagram videos from the studio.
Very good. They're great.
Thanks. So this becomes this piece. And it's probably not at all clear how in the world that happens. So there's a video here. And this video, this is of a different piece, a different day, but it's the same process. So here we have a pattern that, that we've heated up. Initially, we heat them in a kiln to about 1,000 degrees. And glass does not like to go from room temperature to furnace heat, which is usually around 2,300 degrees. In an instant, it would all shatter and explode. So what we do is we bring it up in a kiln to about 1,000 degrees. At 1,000 degrees, you can go into the furnace that's behind me. We call it a glory hole. I don't know why. But we go from 1,000 degrees right into the glory hole, which is around 2,300. And the glass is fine with that degree of temperature change. And then I squeeze it together using these big sword-looking things that I've made. And once I have it all squeezed together, it forms a sheet. And then I can roll that sheet up onto a blowpipe, which I think I'm going to do next here. But I squeeze it, which helps thicken it up and, you know, make sure that everything's attached. And then I take a blowpipe with kind of a donut of glass called a collar, and I attach it. And this has to be done really at a very, very precise temperature, or the glass can be too rigid and crack, or it can be too soft and kind of fold back on itself. And occasionally I have to clean it up a little bit as we go. Maybe it picked up something, some dust from the plate, or some dust from squeezing. And with those big tweezers, I complete the cylinder, and I try to always make that seam. Whoops, I was trying to just pause it, but I try to make that seam part of the design. So I guess we'll go through this again. But what I did there is I switched the axis, which means after I rolled it up into a cylinder, we closed the end, and we made just like a round sphere out of it, and then we put a hole in the side, and we connected a blowpipe 90 degrees. And by putting the blowpipe at 90 degrees, you get that pattern that runs, and the closure, that termination point on the face of the piece as opposed to the bottom of the piece. So, and I know that's kind of, I don't know, it's a little tricky to envision. But that's called switching an axis. And so anytime you see a piece with that vanishing point or termination point, it's because the glass blower switched it. So right here is where we put a hole in the side here. So we use a hot bit of glass to kind of heat up the side. And then I'll use the tweezers to open that up. And then we put another blowpipe on there. And then from there, we will gather. Here's a gathering process. This is from last week, actually. So I already have one gather on this piece, but in order to make these larger scale pieces and to have three-dimensionality to it, we need to encase it in clear glass. And so usually on these larger pieces, I will encase it twice, sometimes 3 times, depending upon how small the pattern is and how big a piece I want and how thick the clear glass layer. I desire. So right here, we're going into a furnace. It's it's running at around 2100 degrees. So the glass is like honey. And there's a big bowl or crucible in there. And so I dip the bubble, the patterned bubble in there, and then I strip some off. And I strip it off because I gathered more glass than I wanted, but it also helps even it up. So it evens up the heat and it evens up the amount of glass. Now from here, there's a whole bunch of parts of the blowing process where we start to inflate it. The blowing actually is probably, only about 20 seconds. It's really, there's not a lot of blowing in glass blowing, which is kind of funny. But my work, I don't blow it a ton because I really like to keep those patterns really tight and crisp. And the more you blow it, the more you stretch it. And there are some patterns that you can stretch more, and there are some patterns that you can stretch less. And some patterns will stretch unevenly, and sometimes that's desirable, and other times it's not. So each piece kind of has its own journey, and it's really through kind of trial and error, and also working with all of these colors for a really long time to know, what you can do and what you can't do in kind of pushing the limits of how much you can blow it. Because obviously there's so much glass there, we could blow this into something huge. But some of them, you'd lose the detail, or you'd lose the precision, or etc. Often people ask how you flatten work, and this is a piece being flattened, and that's the next step after blowing it. So I have cork paddles. First I air the neckline a little bit. That's where it's going to break off later. I air that so it's not so floppy, but you'll see it's still pretty floppy. So my assistant gets it pretty hot, and I rub it with some cork paddles. And you can see the paddles start to burn and throw off sparks. And that's how we flatten it.
These are the same techniques that have been used for thousands of years. It hasn't changed much, has it?
No. It's interesting. There are certain things that have gotten gotten easier. Like we use oxypropane torches, right? They didn't have oxygen concentrators and sources of oxygen, but like that's an innovation. Or furnaces that turn on and off with natural gas. That's probably within, I don't know, last 100 years or so. But yeah, there's a lot of it that is just as medieval as it was in the beginning. Then after I form a bottom on it, we connect it to what's called a punty. And anyone who's seen glass blowing is familiar with this. In order to work the mouth, which is connected to the pipe there, we need to break it off and put it on another rod. So my assistant brings a rod with a bit of glass at exactly the right temperature, and we connect it to the bottom of the piece. And so he's applying the punty right here, and then I put a little water on the neckline, and we break it off. And then once it's broken off, I can form the top. And that's pretty much it for like a folio piece. It's different for every form, right? Every form has a slightly different process. Obviously it's a different shape. But the overall nature of the process is pretty similar. And that was where I was going to conclude.
Very beautiful. Well, we love your work here in Toronto, and I know all over the country. You have a great group of followers. I see that we have quite a few questions, so maybe we should let some of our audience ask you questions at this point.
Sounds good.
And Dan, I'm going to let you do that. If you could open the floor or ask the questions for people.
We actually just have a lot of very positive comments about David's presentation, David's work. So people are really enjoying the piece that you showed in the process as well.
Excellent. Thanks.
So is there anything that you would like to add that we have, like just outside the box, about not what was planned, but maybe something that inspires you, or what you hope to do over the next 10 years or the next 5 years? What do you see changing or being the same for you, David?
Well, I mean, the only thing I'd like to add is A, thanks so much for everyone who appreciates everything that goes into the work. It is really, I mean, it's cliched to say it's a labor of love or a passion, but it really is. I mean, I am just having so much fun with this work, and I feel, you know, blessed that I'm able to work in glass, and I feel incredibly fortunate that I've found a passion that is, you know, can become my livelihood. I think, you know, for the longest time, I wasn't sure if like the corporate world was ever going to be fun enough that I would super love it, and I really super love glass, and I hope that passion comes through, and my appreciation for it, and you know, the fact that other people enjoy it and can appreciate it as well is just pretty amazing. I mean, I wish I was, you know, doing something that saved lives or had a more profound effect sometimes, but you know, this is something that is just so much fun for me.
There's nothing wrong with bringing beauty into the world either.
True.
That's something to be admired, I think.
David,
So,
Amy would like to know, just get a general sense of the scale of the piece on the screen right now.
That's probably about 21 inches tall is my guess. A lot of these are between 19 and 23, and probably about 13 inches wide. It's kind of the general size of a lot of these folios.
just so everyone knows, we're going to send out tomorrow, send out the video of this chat today, plus a list of available pieces as well that David's recently made. So you can see more of the work other than what we've seen, the few pieces in the gallery.
Cool.
So there's a couple of other thank yous, as Daniel said, and I think that is it. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed visiting with you today.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity. It was good fun.
We might do it again. What we have to do is get you to Toronto one of these days, David.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
When it's easier to travel.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how happy I am that you joined us today.
Great. And thanks for everyone attending and for you guys hosting.
And happy birthday to your daughter.
Yeah, I will let her know.
Enjoy this birthday week. I know it's important.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of excitement.
Great. Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.